Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bookish. We are, as you know, your virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life, brought to you by the Southern California News Group and the Bay Area News Group. Sorry, we had some fire-related complications last week and had to bump to this week, so we're glad you could make it again. I'm Sam Dunn, as always, the senior editor for premium content here, and I want to thank our Reader Reward subscribers, as always, for supporting our programs and our journalism. Without you, we are nothing, baby. Without you, we are nothing. If you are a Reader Reward subscriber attending tonight, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate from one of our favorite independent bookstores, Arvita Book Company in Tustin. And last month's winner was, drumroll please, Lene Gaisi. Lene, I hope I'm saying your name right. At any rate, we hope you're enjoying the books and getting a kick out of your gift certificate and subscribing. Okay, if you're not a subscriber, why aren't you a subscriber? Please support local journalism and become a stakeholder in the free and fair communication in the region. In Southern California, go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper. And in the Bay Area, go to bayareanewsgroup.com/reader services. And also, if you've missed any of our past programs, go to scng.com/virtual programs and check those out. And speaking of checking out, there's also our bookish swag for the stylish book nerd to check out. And as you do that, let me go through our usual reminders. If you have questions during the program, please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom toolbar. If you just want to add a comment, use the comment section, the chat section found on your toolbar there as well. If you have a question in the chat, chances are I'm not going to see it because it's going to scroll up. And also, just so you know, one of our interviews tonight with Abigail Thomas is pre-recorded, so we're not going to be able to take live questions, but we will be able to take live questions with Amy Wilson, our first guest. But anyway, I just need to tell you, don't worry, you're not going to miss anything because the link is going to be sent to you after the show. And it's also posted at scng.com/virtual events. And it's also on YouTube. So tonight the show. I'm really delighted to be in the company of two wise and really funny women whose books, I promise you, offer joy and comfort because they offered joy and comfort for me. First, I'm happy to welcome Amy Wilson to Bookish. Amy is the co-host of the parenting podcast, What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood, and the author of the memoir, When Did I Get Like This? Which is a question I ask myself frequently. She has written for magazines like Redbook and Parenting and online for CNN, NPR, and the New York Times, among others. And Amy is also a working actor. She has starred in The Last Night of Ballyhoo on Broadway, appeared as a series regular on several sitcoms, and has been had a guest starring role on many other shows and films. Today, she joins us to talk about her new collection of essays, Happy to Help, Adventures of a People Pleaser. Amy, I'm so thrilled to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
It's really wonderful. I was talking to you earlier and I described this collection as really a meditation on modern womanhood. I told you I received the book as I do so many others in the mail for consideration, and I picked it up and I thought, what is this book? And the first line is, if you've picked up this book, you are probably someone with a lot to do, perhaps a little too much. And I went, is she standing behind me? How? So anyway, so thank you for that. The introduction alone is worth the price of the book, but there's so much more to discover in it. I understand that the book actually came about with a conversation with your publisher. Can you talk about that?
That's right, my publisher to be. So the publisher of this book is Zibby Owens, who I want to give a shout out to all the work she's doing in support of people who have been displaced by the fires. Zibby's bookshop is in Santa Monica, and it's open right now. They have clothes, they have books, everything available to everybody who needs them. So she's the publisher of this book. I met her at a party, and I think it was my friend, my wingman, who said, Amy wrote a book, and I wrote a book in 2010. And she said, oh, what's your book called? And I told her, When Did I Get Like This? And she said, I love that book. I have that book. You should be on my podcast. She has a podcast called Totally Booked with Zibby that's very influential, book podcast. And I said, well, my book came out 10 years ago. And she said, oh, I don't care. I have on authors that I like, come on my show. So I did. I was on her podcast. During that podcast interview, we talked about her new publishing imprint. And she said, you should write a book for that. And again, I said, oh, okay, sure. And
Sure.
then, right. And then when the conversation ended, she said, let's set up a Zoom, let's do this. And it moved really quickly. And just a couple of weeks later, I was writing a book for Zibby Publishing.
That is
Became
that
this
is
book.
crazy to, someone who actually is good on their word. Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Although she said the same thing to me, when this book got published, she said, I can't believe you did it. And I said, well, I had a contract with you. And she said, yeah, but people don't do it. People
People
don't
don't
actually
actually do
write
it.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, this is a collection that moves through different parts of your life. I was saying to you that I really considered it a kind of an episodic memoir. Um,
Hmm.
and it deals with growing up, your sometimes painful acting career. Amy, why does anybody become an actor? I want to
Good
talk about that.
question.
And the relationships, and I just wondered how these essays developed for you. Had you already written some of them, or did you think about how did the book organically come about structurally?
It was because, when I talked to Zibby about what the book would be about, we knew we wanted to be a book about sort of women's lives. My first book was funny essays with a point. So this would be funny essays with a point. And she said, maybe you could do something about slack, about picking up the slack, giving other people slack, and the times when you really needed to pick up with the slack. Go with that, see what you can do. So I kind of worked with that idea for a while and whiteboarded it. And out of all the columns, the times when I needed to pick up the slack, when I needed to have put in more effort than I did, I
Yeah.
could not think of anything to go in that column. And then I realized I could think of a lot of things to go in the column of times I over delivered and stuck
Yeah.
around and over showed up. That column is full of stories. And then that's how really the book got started. Then I understood that was what the book was really about.
I totally get that. I'm going to read you to you because there's a part of the introduction that I actually highlight. Another part of the introduction I highlighted because it resonated so deeply with me, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. You say, yes, I've sometimes sought my sense of purpose in other people. The boundaries where I stop and others begin have not always been so clear. But I'm a woman, and they're not supposed to be. We are supposed to do a lot of caretaking, and we are not supposed to make a big deal out of it. And if you're like me, having revealed even the tiniest inclination toward being dependable and good at getting things done, you can end up feeling like the power lines on the side of the road, always just there making things happen so reliably that one's brain quickly stops processing their presence or never really notices them in the first place. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. That's women's lives. And then I think it's fed back to us when we express overwhelm or frustration with the way things are. It's like, well, you're a people pleaser. You're a perfectionist. You're a control freak. It's fed back to you. There's all these things that are wrong with you. That's why the way that you are, the way things are. But what woman hasn't put somebody else's wants and needs before her own, particularly a parent? It's kind of the assignment. And I think maybe I hew to the assignment more closely than a lot of other women. But it is something that we're told to do, told that we need to be, rewarded for being. And then, when it gets to be too much, we're told that it's a failing in ourselves.
Yeah, but oftentimes we just keep delivering.
Right,
So
right,
it just keeps on. And
right,
which brings us to one of the parts of the book that really, really moved me a lot. You write about your kids, and some health issues that they experienced. And those were sometimes wrenching because in that case, moms are supposed to help. Moms are supposed to know.
right. Right. You are both told that don't be Dr. Mom, don't be Googling. And then also often anybody who's gone through this with a long-standing medical issue with your kids, they do say, you know what, Mom, it's up to you. They call you Mom in the hospital. They don't know your name. They don't care your name. They just say, okay, Mom, this is going to be up to you to figure this out. And then they send you home, whether or
Yeah.
not you feel ready to go.
Yeah. And so much of that feeling of overwhelm, and you articulate it so wonderfully from so many different, it's like you hold up the problem as to the light and look at it from different facets, the way the light hits it. Um, I really appreciated that.
Thank
And
you.
so
I love that. That's very complimentary. Thank you.
it's really true. And so many of the times what I came to is, like you said, it's not us, it's the condition itself, right?
Right.
We can't just pull back and take a massage and count to 10. It's stuff that needs to get done, and we're the ones that were supposed to do it.
Right, right. And if you wait for somebody to say, well, it certainly looks like you have more than you can handle, let me take some of that for you. That doesn't usually happen. You think like, surely somebody will notice I'm juggling 15 things right now. They just hand you one more thing because you look pretty good at juggling.
And we keep juggling.
Yeah,
Um,
and then we keep doing
I
it.
wanted to ask you, there's a lot of, this is a collection of personal essays, but there's a lot of really great information-based, fact-based material in this work as well. I wondered how does research work for you in your writing? Um, you just talk about that. I'm just interested how research works for
It was very important to me because I think as I was writing, I thought like, yeah, this is a thing. And then I would go looking for the research to sort of underpin it. And I love doing research. I do research for my parenting podcast all the time. And sometimes it's a way to procrastinate from writing, but other ways it was a way to really unpack what I wanted to say. And the challenge during the editing process was to make it, to make sure it kind of had turned into two books, funny essays, and then all of a sudden there was research. Okay, so how do we really integrate them and make, when the research comes up, make sure it's something that needs to be added, and then make how the character in the essay sort of stumbles upon this research, or how the author comes in to tell this research, make it feel sort of integral rather than now I'm pulling you out. It's not a
right.
sidebar in a magazine article, right? It's all part of the same thing. That took a long
Yeah.
time to get that right.
That's interesting. As you're talking, it just occurs to me, just a question. Does your experience in acting influence the way you write in terms of viewing POV, character on the page? How does that play together?
I think it does. My first book, I actually wrote a lot of dialogue out as if it were dialogue
I
in a
like
play or a screenplay. So it definitely does. I just think, I think when you're a person who's been writing comedy for a long time, as I have, you start to realize the one good thing about that annoying doctor at the hospital telling you you have to take your kid home in chronic pain. There's just that little part of you like, well, this is a funny story that just keeps you going. I'm saving this for later. This is a crazy moment. And there's so many moments like that in the book that I think as I was living through these heightened situations, it just helps you to have that sense of humor and realize I'm not nuts. This is crazy. And what a story this will make someday. Not that I knew it would be a book, but that I knew that this is nuts.
the stories are there. Speaking
Right, right.
of writing, I have to tell you, I told you earlier, I keep thinking about a line from your book that happens later. I'm taking it out of context, but the line is, I want to reveal every part of myself and heal it with bright lights. And I thought that beautifully points to the opportunity in memoir writing, holding things up that are painful to the light, as I said before, and looking at it. Um, what changes for you in writing and in dealing with your life head on like that on the page?
So much has changed for me over the process of writing this book and figuring out why am I a person who's happy to help? And was I really happy to help? Or did I just think that I was? And what happens when you try to change things? Um, it has changed me. It's changed my marriage. It's changed my relationship with my children and the people closest to me. It's really made me sort of, and I don't mean in the like, I'm not going to do it anymore. They'll just have to wait and see. Like it's not that at all. It's just sort of that the overarching message of the book is just sort of softening into uncertainty and
Mm,
not feeling like you need to be the one who makes sure everything's going to be okay for everyone because maybe they didn't really ask you to do that in the first place.
yeah,
Nobody's saying my life is hard. Why isn't Amy fixing it? But I think there was a part of me that thought that they did. And so softening into, I don't know what's going to happen next, and that's okay, has
yeah.
really changed my life so much. And I don't think I would have ever gotten there without writing the book.
So we have Zibby to thank for changing your life, basically.
Yes, that's right.
Boil it,
Thank you, Zippy.
we boil it down. No, but just a couple more questions and then I'll let you get back to your life. You're on the East Coast, right? You're
I
talking,
am. I'm on the East Coast. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Sometimes it's been said that we write the book we want to read or we need to read. Do you feel that way?
That's exactly it, right? I wrote the book that I wanted to read because all through my life, when things got to be too much, I think I'd kind of look for help. I'd either ask for help or I'd look for help. And what I would get fed back to me is, well, you're too much of a perfectionist, or you're too much of a people pleaser, and you need to fix this thing about yourself. Or you get back this sort of toxic positivity advice. Look on the bright side. Um, Never give up. I know you can do it. Like those kind of things. And
God
so
doesn't give you more than you can handle.
Right, right. Like how many people in California have heard that
Yeah,
the last couple of weeks, right? Like
exactly.
that helps me zero. It makes you feel better.
Yeah.
And so I engage with that. The titles of the essay are actually all these different pieces of advice that overwhelmed women get back instead of help. And I did all those things and exploring why those are insufficient and more importantly, what you're supposed to do instead. This is not a prescriptive book, but really engaging with that. What if there's nothing wrong with me? And but then what, right? But then when you're overwhelmed and leaning in doesn't work and your life-changing magic doesn't give up, then what? What do you do then?
Yeah, good. Well, that leads me to my last question, and it sounds like you've already answered it. Do you have a takeaway that you want readers to take away from the book?
I think that's just it. Yeah. When your life is hard because it's hard, not because there's something wrong with you. And you might have to change the situation, or you might have to accept the unfixability of a situation, but you don't need to fix yourself first. You're objectively doing your best.
Thank you for telling me what exactly I needed to hear tonight. Really, Amy.
Thanks,
And
Sam.
please come back because I loved this book and I've enjoyed talking to you. Everybody, happy to help. Adventures of a People Pleaser. Amy Wilson. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good night.
Good night.
Well, that was a pleasure. And now it's another pleasure of mine to share with you a conversation I recorded last month with a writer that Stephen King calls the Emily Dickinson of memoir, Abigail Thomas. In her literary career, Abigail Thomas has authored 3 novels, but it's her memoirs that have given her a certain cult status in the literary world. Safekeeping, A Three-Dog Life, Thinking About Memoir and What Comes Next, and how thinking about what comes next and how to like it are all a unique blend of writing guidance and personal reflection framed in a kind of mosaic structure. A Three-Dog Life was named by the Washington Post and the LA Times as one of the standout books of 2006, and it's been since translated into 9 languages. She captivated readers worldwide with her most recent release, Still Life at 80, the next most interesting thing. She Zoomed with me from her home in Woodstock, New York, like I said last month, and that was the occasion of the book's paperback release. Let's take a listen to what Abby has to say.
Ta-da.
Ta-da! I think we're live.
I, well, yes, more or less, yes.
More or less. Abby, may I call you Abby?
Oh, please, yes.
Abby, I have to tell you, I wanted to talk to you because I myself needed some inspiration. And
Oh,
I
good.
thought, who do I want to talk to on this program that will inspire me? And you were the person who leapt to mind. I
That's
don't want to fangirl. I don't want to take time fangirling, but um, just know that that's the reason for the season today.
thank you that's awfully nice of you. Thank you.
It's true. As I said to you earlier, you are my Mick Jagger. Um, but
What about Keith Richards?
yeah, with your smoking, you're more Keith Richards, but
I quit smoking 8 days ago.
you did.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, yes, yeah.
Well, that's not a very resounding
No, but it is good. I decided to, I mean, I it caught up with me. I love smoking. I love smoking.
you
I
have
love how smoking gives you a comma in the day. I mean, every time you light a cigarette, you have a comma, and it punctuates a day first I thought, okay, there must be all kinds of punctuation. And then I realized, no, it's just a comma, and it gives you a little time to do nothing or put off something. Anyway, that's the part I miss.
Yeah. Well, and also the looking cool. My mom used to
Oh,
smoke.
totally.
Very cool. In
And
fact, when I recall her, whenever I quote her, I always do this because that's what.
Uh, somebody once told me, you smoke like a truck driver. And that was about 70 years ago. Um, and I found that very complimentary too. And especially at 83, when they look at you and you're 83 and you're lighting up, and they look down on you for being so weak, and so you want to blow it in their direction. Anyway, but I did
Oh,
quit, I think. I think,
you quit for 8 days at least as of today. So that's something.
yes. And it requires no willpower because I eat those little Nicorette things, which
Oh yeah,
work, but you
they
have to.
do. But they can become their own addiction, so be careful with that.
I have a friend who's been doing it for 20 years
Yeah.
because she's afraid that if she stops, she'll light up. Might be better for you. Well, who knows?
Oh, who
Anyway,
knows? Anyway, listen, I wanted to give people who might not know the story of Abigail Thomas a little bit of context. Um, I, as I said to you, you are the patron saint for memoir writers. Anyone who writes memoir has at minimum read Safekeeping, if nothing else. But I think people would be interested to know that you yourself only have a high school education. It's
that's
not
right.
like you have some fancy writing degree. Can you talk a little bit about that and how writing came to you?
Well, I honestly think if I'd gone to college, I would never have become a writer because of all those no trespassing signs, narrative arc and denouement and all that shit, stuff which I don't really understand. What finally happened was, I mean, I had really wanted very badly to be a writer. And every time I tried, I just crumple it up and think, who do you think you are? Because I thought writers had deep thoughts and interesting lives and important things to say. And I didn't have any of that. Um, and then I had a little adventure when I was 48, which I won't go into, although I'd love to. Anyway, when I came home, I had this feeling in my hands. Well, maybe it's like when you make your first pie crust.
Uh,
Won't be any good, but 8 pie crusts later, and maybe you'll have
Pretty good.
something going on. So I decided to take a workshop. And the workshop, when I got home, there was a notice on the kiosk, which we don't have anymore, that said, just get some writing done. And it was given by, I was so lucky, a writer named Bill Rohrbach. And before every weekly meeting, he would say, he would quote from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. In the experts, no, in the beginner's mind are many possibilities, in the expert's mind are few. And I thought, I qualify. I am a beginner, and I'm still a beginner. Every time I sit down and do anything, and then I don't know, it worked for me. In fact, I love it that I don't have a college degree, and that safekeeping, which every publisher in New York turned down except one. And it's still in print.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Ha,
Ah, ha, ha.
ha.
And for about 8 years, I gave a course in the MFA program at the New School, which is
In New
downtown.
York. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a workshop I would have been unable to join because I had no college degree.
And
And
yet you could teach it.
I could teach it. I found that very amusing. And it was interesting. It was fun. I loved it. But then I moved up state, and
Right. To
hard,
Woodstock, right?
it was hard to get into the city. So I did it
You-
for about a year, but then that was that.
But you still teach through online
I
interviews and
do. Well, I do.
webinars.
I've been giving a writing workshop up here for about 20 years.
That's what
And
I've heard.
that's, it's just, yes, I love it. And for 11 years, I gave a workshop for people with cancer because my daughter had had a really terrifying cancer. And
Mhm.
I wanted to give back to the place in Kingston, which is near here, the place that had been helpful to her. And that was an amazing experience because we became, all of us, I think there were about a dozen of us at first, we became almost one organism. It wasn't that we all trusted each other, which we did, and we wrote from the heart. I say we, I didn't do any writing for that. But it was maybe the most important experience of my life because many
Oh,
people died, and the people who died were the most alive people I knew. And you learn a lot from people who have metastatic cancer. And we lost a lot of wonderful people, but people kept joining. And then about 2 months ago, I saw that there was someone else who was probably going to die, and I just didn't want to do it again. So
you couldn't do it again.
I
You couldn't
just
hold those stories anymore.
I couldn't I couldn't let that happen to me. I mean, that's very selfish to say, but I'd lost so
Well, you've lost so.
miss I miss so many people who were
I was
really,
going to say, in your writing, you write about grief and loss. It's been a continuing theme in your work.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's a continuing theme for all of
Yeah.
us.
For 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 if you're alive, that's a continuing theme, right? Loss.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love your work, as you know, but still life at 80, one of the favorite lines of mine, I wanted to talk about and discuss it a little bit. You say, the most important thing writing has taught me is this: the more vulnerable you allow yourself to be, the stronger you become. It
Yeah.
sounds counterintuitive, I know. It sounds like bullshit. Here's the thing: you can't change the past, but if you can face it, both the present and the future will shift. I love that so much, Abby.
It's really true. And if there's something that crops up in a book, in a memoir you're writing, and you don't even want to know it about yourself, but you have to put it in because who are you fooling?
Yeah.
And once you've dragged it up from the dark, it isn't the end of the world. It's finite. It has edges. And what I do, I guess the moment that really changed my life was I was writing a book called A Three Dog Life.
Yes.
My husband, who got so badly hurt, and
Your
I moved.
husband, Rich, correct? Was it?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, it was Rich, and he had a traumatic brain injury from which he never recovered, which is why I moved up here, because the
Right.
only place that would take him was here, and without drugging you up and everything. And at some point, I thought, I'm having a good time. Well, how dare you? How dare I? Um, so when I'm stuck somewhere and there are words that you can, anyway, I have the dictionary, American Heritage Dictionary of Indo-European Roots.
I was gonna bring that up. It's what you
Yeah,
have two copies of it, don't you?
I have two
It's one of,
copies, one in here and one in another room. But I was looking for it before we got started, and I think they must both be in the other room. But anyway, you look that up, and if you're lucky, you get a word. I looked up guilt, and guilt was just always guilt. And then I looked up acceptance.
mm,
And because my sister had said, if you keep going back before it happened, and if there was anything you could have done, you haven't accepted it. So I looked up acceptance, and it came from a word that means a thread used in weaving. And my whole life changed right then because I was weaving. You have to keep on weaving. The thread may fray or break, or yours. Anyway, that I highly recommend the American Heritage Dictionary of the European Roots. Yeah, and it was hard to put in, but no, it was hard to face. When I decided I needed to write it, I wrote it, and then having found acceptance, meaning what it meant, you do the more vulnerable you make yourself, the stronger you get, because you've revealed something that you've learned something from. And I remember getting a letter from somebody who said before she read that she had felt like the worst person in the world, and now she just felt human. And
Yeah.
I don't write for other people, but it's awfully nice when it winds up being helpful for somebody.
It's been so helpful. I can't even tell you that again, that's why I wanted to speak to you because it your work is so helpful. It's so human. And one of the things you just said was interesting to me. You said you don't write for other people, and yet the quality of your prose is such that you feel like you're sitting down across the kitchen table.
That's
I feel like I've had many cups of coffee with you, Abby.
that's really nice. It's because I don't, I, I'm not an intellectual, I just write. I don't, you write something and you're finished with it and then you get out. You don't have to, I write such short things, partly because my memory is bad, but good for moments.
Oh, well, I love that. I wanted to talk about that as well. Your style is very characteristic in the sense that you write in, I call it a mosaic style. You write in these vignettes, you write in fragments, you write in poetry, but when you pull back, you can see from these bits a larger picture emerges. Um,
Thank God.
thank God. But you began that style how? How did
Because
that become a characteristic of your writing?
well, with safekeeping, that was when I started to do short things, because my second husband, Quinn Luttinger, had we'd gotten married, and we had a miserable marriage, and we got divorced and hated each other for until I married Rich, because every now and then Quinn would say, "Are you ready to be a wife again?" And I'd say, "I was a wife." No. Anyway, we became very close friends. And when he died, I realized that the past was now dry, because when you've done things you wish you had done differently and you're both still alive, there's this sort of fantasy that somehow or other we can fiddle with the past a little bit and make amends for the mistakes we made, especially with kids. And then he died, and I realized it was set now. What had happened. There was no way to change it. It wasn't some balls in the air we could keep in the air. And these little pieces out of nowhere, I didn't know what I was doing. I kept remembering moments, and I don't know. And it was interesting to write some of them in the first person and in the second person and in the third person, because sometimes if you write something in the first person, it shines a very glowing light on you, and you don't want to be either an angel, and you also don't want to be a victim. So it helps to change. If you're going to write something that sounds self-congratulatory, I put it in the third person, so I don't sound as though I'm taking credit for something that I really am not taking credit for, but it might sound like that if I put it in the first. It was an interesting experiment, and I thought I was going to end whatever I was writing when I realized I was actually writing something. I thought I was going to end with Quinn's death, but so much had been revealed to me in the writing that that wasn't. I had I I realized I wasn't dead, and I had to keep going a little further. And there's something that happened with my oldest daughter when she had a daughter. That was what I wanted to end on.
Mhm.
And then I had to earn that. And somehow or other, that was the last section. I think if you're, I mean, I know this is very bossy to say, and my daughter Catherine always shakes her head at me. But I think if you are going to write memoir and you know where you're going to end, and that's where you end, you might be doing something wrong, you know, because somewhere along the way, you're going to get surprised.
Yeah.
And that changes everything, or at least it changes where you're going to wind up, or at least it almost always has for me. And that's so interesting. And I think I think so many of us have had so many different lives,
Mm.
and things happen that are so confusing. You're 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 writing for clarity,
Yes.
and clarity is comfort, whether well, I've always found things I didn't understand, and then finally no matter how painful they were, that was comforting to understand something that had happened or something someone had said, and just facts. Well, facts. It's very interesting when you compare notes with your sister. What do you write, by the
I
way?
was gonna say,
Tell me what you write.
what I write. That's one of the things I write. I write memoir primarily. I wrote a novel and I write journalism and two memoirs.
You could you tell me? Your name is very familiar, and I should have looked you.
Samantha Dunn. Here was my big. This is silly to talk about because
No,
it's
it isn't. Oh,
not
it
by accident. That was my big book years ago.
that's
Came out in 2000.
that's a fantastic title.
Thank you. Yeah,
Wow.
but one of the things that you talk about in Still Life at 80, I loved you talk about your memory is failing, but that it's an achievement. You're finally living in the moment.
That's right. And it's really true. And it's nothing I had to study or read, or I'm not a Buddhist, but the moment has everything. The moment is very roomy, and there's always something, or almost always something that gets your attention. And even if it makes, or maybe even especially if it makes no sense, start there and see why this, why now is this seeming to be so, I can't get this out of my head. And then you have an adventure because you've no idea what you're doing or where you're going. And then by some miracle, towards the end, you get the ending.
I
and,
know it's
and
really
it's different from anything you'd even imagined ending up with. It's thrilling. It is really thrilling.
Do you still find excitement in writing? Are you still writing, Abby?
Yeah, I am. I
Can
see.
I can I
Yeah,
ask what your process is? Do you have any kind of regular schedule, or do you just
I
let the
I
muse?
I basically I basically write every day, and it doesn't always work. Well, I had these two horrible sofas that were really just, I mean, they were just awful, torn up in shreds and cotton coming out and strings on the floor. And I bought a new sofa at Habitat for Humanity for $88. And the night before the person was coming to take the old one away and bring the new one, I was thinking about how I better get organized. What's underneath the cushions on that? Maybe I have a mouse, maybe who, um, so I wrote about not doing it, and then doing a couple of other things. And then when I came back from getting groceries with my daughter the next day, the sofa was already here. It's rather a waspy sofa. And when I came back and saw it, I was, I, I sort of lost track of myself. And I didn't feel comfortable with myself. And I thought, with this sofa, I should be wearing pearls and stockings, and my hair should always be brushed. And then I picked up this thing from the floor, and I've hung it up. It's probably hard for you to understand, but it was a chewed up shoe that one of my dogs had chewed up. And it looked to me, well, first I thought maybe it's a broken bird because it's got black wings that are torn on either side, and the shoelaces are its legs, and it looks as though it's something got at it. And I hung it up on the wall next to me, and I felt quite comfortable again. Then I thought maybe it was an angel who died listening to the news. And I can show, I don't think you'll be able to understand it because you can almost
Uh,
be here.
is that the shoe?
That's the angel who died listening to the news. But it made me feel very much at home. It's the antidote to that waspy sofa.
There
It's
you go.
because I
Stored
usually
in the universe.
I
You
like
just
things
store
that
in the universe. You needed a yin and a yang.
I did. And I usually like things that are a little beat up and old, but well, those couches, that was really bad. And now I have this gorgeous thing that I might not have noticed had I not been thinking about the sofa, which sounds so boring, but it did take me some. Usually, if you if you start with whatever is crossing your mind all the time, you'll get somewhere. You have no idea where. And the
Yeah.
only way you'll find out is by doing it, and then you do get somewhere. And there was a reason that you didn't, well, of course, I hadn't found that yet. Anyway, it's very interesting, and it's always an adventure. And that's what I do. I don't have a big idea. I just have something that, it might be the ant on the bookcase in the middle of winter, or the wasp that was
Yes.
dying and didn't move, although I stared at it. Anyway, that's
Yeah,
what
your
what I,
wasp reminded me of Virginia Woolf's moth on the windowsill.
oh,
Anybody ever told you that?
because I haven't read the moth on the windowsill.
You haven't? Oh my gosh, it's one of her best essays. You gotta, I sent it
Oh,
to you.
goody.
You gotta look it up.
Oh, I will.
Oh,
Anyway,
anyway, you were channeling Virginia Woolf and you had no idea.
no,
Um,
goody, lucky me. Mick Jagger and Virginia Woolf,
I tell you, you are cool. You are the coolest of the cool.
even though I don't smoke anymore.
Even, well, we might have to talk about that, but
I know.
anyway,
Oh, well.
one of the things I loved about Still Life at 80. I want you to know that it's an aspirational book for me. In another 20 years, I hope to be you at 80. But it's really, you really delve into the struggle to remain relevant in a culture that ignores old age. And I'm wondering, you're a couple years finished from this book now,
Yep, 83.
83. I'm wondering, does it get any better?
You don't give a shit. You really just don't give a shit. And it is so much easier to go outside without sucking your stomach in and wondering who's looking, because nobody's looking. Invisibility is a superpower.
There we go.
If there's a young workman with no shirt on, you can just stand there and admire him and he won't notice. Nor will anybody else. You can look at anything you want for as long as you want. I really don't care because I know I'm finally a writer, and that's what matters to me. I don't need to be recognized or, I mean, I'm having such a good time. I'm having such an interesting time. And
Well, Abby.
it's really, and I've got good friends, and the two workshops, well, no, I'm not doing two workshops, not just doing one now. And that it's wonderful to see how people who were writing with the equivalent of a Hallmark greeting card when they started are now really writing.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful to
And
see.
gratifying to have people tap into their own stories and the power of their own stories.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the courage to write them, you know, and everybody in the workshop is both an interesting writer and a very good reader.
Oh,
Uh,
that's
so there's that. I miss doing it at home, although I'd have to do a lot of tidying. When COVID struck, we started doing it on Zoom. And one of the advantages of Zoom was that you could have people who lived in Missouri be at the
right.
shop.
Yeah.
She died. God, she was wonderful. I loved her. Um, anyway, the only trouble with Zoom is if somebody will not shut up, and there is one person in the workshop who just
Well, Abby, you've always got the mute button. If you're in control of the Zoom, you can always do the mute button. We're almost at the end of our time for this episode. I could talk
Oh,
to you all day. I wish I were at your house with a cup of coffee and we could
oh, I wish you were too.
next time I'm in New York, I'm inviting myself.
Oh, please do.
I will, but I want to ask you for a final send off. I know that there are people in our audience who want to write, or who are maybe writers, or who maybe want to start writing. Can you give us a prompt? Can you give us a line to start
Well,
our
the
journey?
first, I'll give you two.
Okay.
When I remember specifically walking across 110th and Broadway to go down to do something, and into my head popped, any 10 years of your life, 2 pages, 3-word sentences. And it couldn't be 4 words. There's nowhere to hide behind a 3-word sentence. But what's so interesting is that some people wrote about marriage and divorce and loss, and some people wrote about sleeping on grass. It's just very interesting and hard to do. But the other one that I discovered in an old diary in the middle of a Thanksgiving dinner, this is a lie I've told before.
All right, everyone. That's our prompt from Abigail Thomas. This is a lie I've told before. 2 pages. We want
Yes,
next time.
yes, everything is 2 pages. That's the good part. Let's see. Or 2 pages of what stays the same, something that
Oh,
stays the same, or something that you have too much of. You know, there's
Okay, is it awkward to finish by saying, I love you, Abby. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to buy your book. I'm going
Oh,
to
I'll
buy
send it
all
to
your
you.
books. No, thank you so much. That was just lovely. Thank you.
It was lovely. I'll see you next time. I hope next book, please come on.
Oh, yes, and when you're in New York, please come up.
Okay, it's a deal. All right.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. Thanks to Amy and Abby for coming on. And always thanks to our production manager, Julie Corlett, who truly makes the world spin. You never see her, but she makes the world spin. Next month, we've got another great lineup of authors. Of course, Sandra Singh Low will be back popping in with New York humorist. The New Yorker humorist is what I wanted to say, Henry Alford. And we've also got 2 fantastic journalists talking about their process. Please catch up on our past episodes and watch the other virtual programs too on scng.com/virtual events. If you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or if you have additional questions, please email us at events@scng.com. Or you guys, if you want to give me suggestions directly, or if you want to complain, or if you want to just talk to me, hit me up on email, sdunn@scng.com. And remember, you can always find great coverage of books in our newspapers every day, online at our sites, and in the Book Pages newsletter with books editor Eric Peterson. Thanks. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe and I hope you're happy. Be well, everybody. We'll see you next month.